Welcome back, everybody, to the Black Experience. I am your host, Ermias Hagos here, and we are back with another episode in Season 5. Before we even start, to all my returning viewers, to all my listeners that have been there from the start, thank you so much. This is a journey I did not see coming. This is something that has been a joy every episode. I'm loving it more and more, and I want to thank all you guys for supporting me. Without you guys, I would not have had the ability to keep going and putting out this work. And to anyone that's new, welcome to the team. Welcome to the Black Experience. This is an amazing podcast. Make sure to click that follow button on Spotify and subscribe button on YouTube to get more notifications, more updates, and stay up to it. And click that bell. And as usual, we have a very special guest with us today, though. Today we have someone who is a husband, a father, a successful businessman, and part of the larger Bellingham community. So let's put our hands together and let's bring up Mr. Mike Parry. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm well. How's your day/weekend been so far?
Great, actually. I've done a lot of relaxing this weekend, which is much needed. So, yeah.
That's awesome. I guess what is relaxing? Does relaxing look like, Netflix and chill? Does it look like going somewhere? What does that look like?
Yeah, so a little bit of that. Sometimes it's not having a lot of stuff on my calendar and having flexibility and not being committed to any particular thing, right? So downtime for me usually involves few people and and quiet. So and just enjoying my family and my son. And
yeah. Absolutely. I'm actually the same way because I recently graduated and I'm still on that like kind of honeymoon phase of feeling that graduation high. And
congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. It feels amazing. And so that whole period, I knew my social battery had to be high.
Yeah.
But after a while, I was like, okay, it's slow. I need time for myself now.
Yeah. I'm one of those people who I recharge being alone. Lots of people kind of suck the life out of me sometimes. So that said, my wife's the opposite. So it's great. She's the one that keeps my social life alive, right? And got to find that balance.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, Mike, man, thank you so much for taking the time to join me on this podcast. I remember the first time we met at the Brothers meeting, Brothers to Brothers meeting that we have here in Bellingham. And Mrs. Kina Brashear actually shouted you out. Because right before I did a podcast with her, she was like, do you know someone named Mike Parry? I was like, no, I don't. Well, you should have him on your podcast. And she shouted you out. So I had you on my list. And then I think it was that same day I came that evening. And then I was like, okay, this is Mike. I got to have him on now.
Called out by Kina. I love it. Yeah, Kina's, I like Kina and she's like me. Her and I have been in this community a super long time. And I feel like I've known her for a really long time. And at the same time, I don't feel like I know her as well as I'd like to. So yeah, I think Kina and I will get to know each other a little better over the years here.
Absolutely. Yeah. Exciting times to come. Well, Mike, I would love to and kind of kick it off a little bit if you want to tell the audience a little bit about your background, what your early childhood looked like, and just your upbringing.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I know we have limited time, so we won't cover it all, but it's been
we'll try our best.
It's been a super interesting life as I spent some time, especially over the last decade, just kind of reflecting back on how I was raised, and I was born in San Francisco in 1969 and adopted, put up for adoption, and adopted by a man and woman who had met each other where they grew up in New York and in New Jersey, and he was a 6'3" Irish guy and she was a 6 tall blonde German woman, and they got married and had a baby, which was my sister, and almost killed my mom, and so they adopted, and that was me. They moved to California and adopted me, and so I grew up. They split sort of not long after, like when I was a toddler, and so I grew up in a mostly living with one or the other, but mostly it was my father, and it was a wild childhood for sure. We were kind of in the counterculture, if you will. Grew up between Big Sur, California, and the Russian River. In a commune, a good part of that time, and just had a really interesting, childhood. Moved to Washington halfway through high school. My dad's work took me all over the globe, and so I got to really get some perspective of the world by visiting places that were often not frequented by especially people my age, but I think people that grew up in America anyway.
Yeah.
So really got really interesting perspective, I think, of the rest of the world, at least the corners of it that I was fortunate enough to visit back then.
Yeah.
So definitely that's stayed with me my whole life.
Yeah. From all the places that I guess you were able to travel so young, which first of all, you're so blessed to do, because travel is on my list of things I want to do. I've been outside of the country, but not as much as I wanted to. But any favorite spots, any favorite places, memories that you've had?
I think, boy, they were all so uniquely different and also so wonderful. We traveled all over the Soviet Union in what was the Soviet Union in the 80s. And that was super interesting and really great, because I was at an age like 14, 15 where I could gain some perspective of the reality of going there as an American citizen, when we were told as American citizens that was the enemy, right? And vice versa.
Yeah.
The people over there were wonderful. It was very interesting to me to be able to see all these different parts of that country and then experience reality versus what you're led to believe by way of politics and media and all of that. Northern Ireland, boy, that was fun. I was in Belfast in 86 and had some really good kind of scary and fun times back then. And again, you think about, as a parent now, I would be super concerned about my son being in an environment like that. And I'm thankful to have the opportunity to go to places where there were some really horrible things happening. And at the same time, there was some really wonderful people trying to bring people together and see each other for who we are and get along and figure out how to work together. And so, you go from cars set on fire crashing into the gate where you're staying to going to a school and rebuilding a portion of it or whatever, right? I mean, whatever the excuse was to be there, the bigger picture of those trips was just how collective consideration of the community that you're in and the people coming together to do something positive.
Gotcha.
I think that's kind of that type of thought and put to action really helped kind of develop how I think.
Kind of community based and community people coming together, because that's ultimately how we accomplish things.
100%.
Yeah. And I've learned that the hard way, growing up, trying to do certain things by myself without, I would be stuck for example, on a math problem. And I wouldn't let others or my teacher know, because I'd be like, oh, if I raise my hand and ask for help, then she's going to think I'm dumb or whatever. Just small things, but absolutely.
And didn't want the attention, I imagine, either, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I didn't, because she would be coming over to me, and then my peers would look at me and they're like, oh, look at him. He can't do this math problem by himself or whatever. So
it's funny how when you think about how what you choose to care about, right? Yeah. Especially as you're developing and, you're a young adult or a teenager, and then you're older than that now. But I think I deal with this with a 16-year-old son who's like, I'm not going to raise my hand and ask a question in class because I don't want to be perceived as dumb, or I don't even want to call any attention to myself at all.
Yeah.
Instead of, I want to know the answer to that because I want to do well, and I want, I have interest in what I'm learning about, right? And so it's that interesting defensive posturing that we see a lot of, right?
Yeah. And that connects me to a quote I heard was like, in your 20s, something to the effect of, in your 20s, you think about what people think about you. In your 30s or 40s, you stop thinking about what people think about you, and then in your 60s and 70s you realize that they were never thinking about you in the first place.
Yes, I've heard something of that nature. Yeah.
To that effect, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, wow, that maybe I could start from that mentality now when I'm in my 20s.
Yeah, well, they say there's no substitute for time and experience, and so it's difficult. And I think it's also, once you get, so I'm in my 50s, and so and having a teenager, and you think that you're doing your teenager a favor by helping them avoid pitfalls that you went through in life by trying to help them with things, right? Like I'm trying to educate you on something so you don't struggle the way I struggled with it. And the reality is they're not in a place to hear it. You know what I mean? And so no matter what advice you give, if they're not in a place to hear it, it doesn't matter. Right. And so, you learn your lessons through life, and you're right about the different age ranges in which those things happen. But right now, what I'm learning is what I think my son needs, I'm wrong. I think he needs answers or solutions or warnings about things that he can avoid problems in his life. And the reality is he needs love and support, right? So he can endure those things, right? And learn his lessons. He needs to learn those lessons by being present and experiencing them and hopefully making good choices that aren't like long-lasting decisions that really negatively impact him. But I can't take away or help him avoid experiences that are going to help him grow and develop and become the person he's going to become, right? And is.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do.
I bet it is, yeah.
It's hard to do.
I'm not a parent, but I can only imagine how hard that is.
Yeah, but it's important to, I think, and it's taken me this long to recognize that, just give him love, give him support, be there for him. Don't think you can help him avoid all of the problems in this world, because problems are part of life.
Well, I really hope my parents listen to this episode then, so that then they're not giving me, no, my parents are awesome, but yeah.
Well, I mean, I think all parents struggle with that stuff though, You try to do for your kids and you want them to appreciate all the things you do for them. And at the end of the day, love and support is where it should start. That's what you should focus on, in my opinion, and give them the tools to deal with the things they're going to be faced with in this life, but they've got to do it. You can't do it for them,
Absolutely. Yeah. Kind of transitioning back to your early childhood.
Yeah.
First of all, I'm always curious because, I'm a 2000s baby. I was born in 2000. The 80s.
Yeah.
The Soviet Union. Growing up near them, what was that experience like? Kind of dive a little bit deeper into that.
Well, I think at that age for me, of course, we went a couple of times and there was several week trips, and I was 15 probably at my oldest. The people were always really curious, right? Because there was definitely a lack of information that they had. And there was a lack of information that we had, but again, there was different, we had different information. And so going there, with really just open eyes and open heart to who they are. They were all so curious and wanted to know all about you, and they wanted to know about your life, and they wanted to buy your Levi's jeans. Because, a lot of the time and back then, they really wanted to be exposed to the culture of our country. And I think they really romanticized the culture of America, at least their perspective of what the culture of America was there. And so that really showed through in the way they communicated and the questions they asked. But they were all, I don't think I ever met like a mean-spirited person there, and it's not to say they don't exist. It just means that that's not what I didn't experience any of that while I was there. I experienced nothing but, inquisitive, friendly people who wanted to know you as much as they could. And they all really worked hard to stay in touch. I regret not being more thoughtful about that at that age, as how do I ensure that I can stay in touch with these people? Yeah.
I feel like politics kind of distorts the way things are, because it kind of seems like, okay, let's say if the U.S. is going to war with a certain country, then it seems like maybe people are going to demonize everyone, not realizing it's really just, is it just the top leadership that's really where the issue is, and not just normal citizens from that country, if you know what I mean.
I do. And I think that's a big conversation in and of itself, right? And I think that for sure there's an agenda, right, by those who lead. There always is. But when you get to the level of, leading a nation, and influencing a nation, it was considerably different back in the 80s than it is now, right? Just because of information and access to it. But I would say that back then, news was more news, and so you'd watch things, and although there was agenda coming through, and you would still hear people refer to them as the commies or the red commies or whatever, however they wanted to try to demonize those folks. It all came from a place of ignorance, which is where hate breeds, right? And so from that standpoint, that certainly existed then. And I think, that was the opportunity to transcend back then at that age. And
Right.
that's why I had a different perspective, is I got to see the reality of who the people were, and stay away from the politicians and stay away from the government side of that, right? My father was very much about citizen diplomacy in these countries, not dealing with governments.
Gotcha.
And although it was necessary to organize some of what he did, that certainly was important, that we're dealing with everyday people, not people in positions of power with agendas.
Yeah. Human is human,
Yep.
Wherever you go.
Yep.
You mentioned your father a few times. Would you say he's one of those kind of like people that were influential or like a role model type of figure, or did you have any of those kind of people growing up?
He was. I didn't realize it until later. I didn't realize what I got from him until I was much older. In fact, probably after he died, which was young. He died at 57, and I was 26, I think, at that point. So he was influential, just in his ambition to go do these things that he went and did. But I didn't recognize him as that, right? There's other people who were super influential to me in all kinds of ways. The first long-term job I had, working for a company here in Bellingham, and I worked 11 years of my life for that person, and felt when I left that I was pretty underappreciated. And when I left, I was treated pretty poorly because of and I left the way anybody does, right? With notice, and tried to do all the right things. And they felt like it seems to me that they feel like I walked away from them and their company. And I did. I was trying to better myself, and I felt like
Sure.
I'd been taken advantage of. And so that was influential for me, because it helped me to value my time and energy and effort and start to recognize what I was good at. Right. So that was an influential opportunity. So, looking for the good out of things. So that person was influential. There's been a number of people who have really helped me gain perspective on how I not only see the world, but how I see myself in it. There's a woman named Janet Ott here, who's local, that I had the privilege of going through some of the courses that were really about learning about yourself. And they had to do with things like personal responsibility and accountability, recognizing that your parents have done the best they know how. So don't blame your problems on your parents.
Okay.
Right?
I'll try not to.
Well, I mean, again, I think that if you look at that and say, look, they did the best they knew how in that moment, it doesn't mean all parents do the best they know how. Some parents know better and do worse, and that's how it is. But I think, once you become a parent and you recognize that, geez, I didn't realize that I was such an asshole at 14 years old. You know what I mean? I know it now because I had one, right?
Yeah.
And you go through it, and so you go, holy crap, I didn't know what I didn't know. But her courses were super influential to me because I've kept that with me my whole life, and it helped me understand some really basic things like, who am I attracting into my life? You know what I mean?
Right.
Because I'm responsible for who I attract into my life in a lot of cases, right? I mean, It's one thing to be a true victim of something happening that, but at the end of the day, this victim mentality, I don't subscribe to that. I don't feel like I'm a victim. I am going to be in control of, control is not fair. I am going to be involved in what happens in my universe, right?
Gotcha.
And I'm going to choose to either attract good people into my life or not.
Sure.
Right? I'm going to choose to make good decisions about where I put my time and energy. And if I don't get the results I want, I have the opportunity to change course, right? I'm not going to be a victim of anything at the end of the day. And so that really, for me, kind of helped me identify a lot of things about me as far as how I put my best foot forward and go out and do what I want to do.
Yeah. And I think the thing is, there are actual victims out there, sure.
100%. Not saying there aren't victims.
Yes.
I'm just saying that if you go through your life with a perspective that, hey, I'm going to go out and put myself in good situations and try to surround myself with positive people who have influence, that could be beneficial to me. I'm going to go out and try to contribute to my community in positive ways. That I'm not going to be a victim where, oh, I didn't get this job, or I didn't, this didn't happen for me, or that didn't happen for me.
Yeah.
I don't want to have the mindset that I'm waiting for somebody else to come do something that's going to help me. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean, because that sounds a lot like a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset.
Right.
I remember, we always learned that in school: growth mindset, fixed mindset. Fixed mindset is always waiting on people, kind of just closed off, very close. And I think, while recognizing, yes, there are real victims, for the most part, that mentality you have control over.
Yes.
And I don't think I would have graduated if I had a victim mentality. If I were to look at myself and say, hey, I'm black, I'm Eritrean, why I'm at a school that's predominantly white, and I feel like a victim. If I were to think that way and close off my brain like that, how can I graduate? How can I start a podcast? How can I do certain things? So
right.
I know exactly what you mean on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, it took a long time to get to that understanding of this. Right. But those classes really opened my eyes, and I was 22 probably back then. Right. So I was exposed to some education and development, personal development and understanding that really was impactful for me throughout the rest of my life, whether I recognize that it would be or not. Right. Sometimes you don't recognize the things that you've done and how they've influenced and impacted your life until later, and you look back and go, oh, okay, well, that all checks out. Right. That makes sense.
So you just saying that just kind of excites me with what I'm doing with this podcast, and because I'm like, I'm having all these guests and I'm hearing all their advices and stories and stuff, and at this point in my life, I'm just like, I'm just getting to know more people. Great networking. Yeah. But we'll see what it does.
Well, the beautiful part of it for you is, you're young and you're going after these things, and when you have an idea, you're taking action, right? And I don't know that there's anything more important than that. Like, you want to do well in this world, step one, show up, right? Show up for it, whatever it is. Be there to do it, right? And then step two, empower yourself with the tools and resources and people around you to get it done, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And not everybody understands that.
No,
a lot of people don't, and I don't think it's something that society necessarily teaches you to do.
No, you got to execute. You got to take action.
Yeah.
But yeah, that amazing. Journey to Bellingham. I know you kind of touched on it a little bit, but take us a little bit. What brought you to Bellingham originally, and what your experience has been here in this town?
Yeah, I've been here a long time. I moved here. I was 19. I was living in I was living down in Bremerton, actually. I graduated from Bainbridge Island in '87, and then was always working and trying to go to school at the same time. And my high school girlfriend from Bainbridge Island was up here, as well as a couple of my good friends. And so I was up here all the time on the weekends, And then I just, I was kind of done in Bremerton, and had gone through a program at Olympic College and decided, why not? Let's go up. And so I had a couple of buddies from high school and my girlfriend from high school, and we all rented a house on Elm Street. And I moved up here, and friend hooked me up with a job. That's the job that I happened to stay in from the age of 19 till I was 30. Watched all my friends, move away to get a job down south. The girlfriend thing, didn't work out for us. Great friend, still to this day. She's a good friend of mine. In fact, it's interesting. Most of my friends back from that era, from this school, we have this core kind of group that continue to communicate and see each other pretty regularly.
That's so awesome.
That's wonderful for sure.
Yeah.
Being this long. And so I came up here and I did what most kids do, which is you're just trying to figure it out. I didn't have any kind of financial backstop. I was kind of out of the house at 17. And so for me, it wasn't really a question about what do I want to be when I grow up? It was really more of what do I got to do to pay the bills and keep a roof over my head? And so my job wasn't a dream. I didn't dream of the job that I had at the time, but I was good at it, and I was put into a position to manage the company and at a pretty young age. And so I did that, and I did it because I felt like that's what I know how to do. Not because it's what I wanted. Right? I didn't get to the what do you want to be when you grow up questions until I was in my early 30s, actually.
Yeah.
But I came up here, got a job, kept my job. I was living in an apartment on 23rd Street, Like most people, that are young trying to figure it out here. School was super difficult for me to stay engaged in because of the work that I did. And I kind of went from working nights, doing 2 to 10 shifts, into all of a sudden it's all day, 10-hour shifts, sometimes 12.
Yeah.
I bought a house when I was 22 out in Ferndale to get out of the apartment and get away from the partying and the stuff that was happening with, again, friends, but they had a different world than I did. And, they went to school, and a lot of them had parents writing checks to make that happen. And they were partying at night, and I couldn't afford to do that. I made that decision. A little help from Mom. One of the big things she did was come up and recognize the situation and say, this isn't going to work, and you need to make a plan. And,
That's awesome. Yeah. And that's not an easy decision to make, by the way, at 22. I mean,
no, but again, it was easy by default, right? In other words, a lot of my decision making wasn't being driven by desire. It was being driven by necessity, or at least what my perception of necessity, what I believed was necessary for me.
Gotcha.
And so that, again, bought a house that had an in-law suite that I could rent out because I couldn't afford it without that, right? And I didn't want to live with roommates because I'd already had that experience.
Yeah.
So I did what I did because I thought it's what I had to do.
Right. Yeah. And it's also like, if you didn't do that, the other alternative was
not good.
Not good.
Right.
Yeah. And I was very blessed to have parents that have supported me and stuff like that. So this is why, like, when I hear different stories of people that don't have necessarily the same blessings or certain things, it makes me more appreciative of the things that I have, and to make sure that I use it to the best I can.
Good. I think that's super important.
It's a good motivator.
You need somebody else to tell you what those things are too, right? We're not always good at recognizing the things about ourselves that could be of high value in action for you, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, Mike, I know I kind of know you through your business, and that happening. Tell us a little bit. Was business was that something that you've always wanted to do, or I guess what was the motivation behind getting behind that?
So, I'd always since I was running somebody else, I'd run other people's businesses, right? Essentially, from 20 to almost 33 or something like that, 35 almost. I would run other people's businesses, and I got to a point where I just didn't want to do that anymore. And I met my wife, and that was hugely impactful in a lot of ways for me. Like, she is an RN, and I was running a company, and I was fine, but it wasn't wonderful. I was growing this company and got it to the point where the guy said, "Hey, this is wonderful. Everything's like we want it. I'm selling it." And so that kind of led me to say, well, I need to step away from that. But instead of my default, which is go find another company to run, go do what I already know how to do, my wife says, "Hey, why don't you like take a minute and try to figure out what you want to do?" Which was a weird place for me to be because I hadn't ever really done that.
Right.
And I can remember really vividly leaving that job and going to her apartment, and she was at work, and sitting down on her couch and staring at a TV that was turned off for like an hour. Just thinking, wow, I've never not had a job. And, I had no job. I had no prospect to go get another one. And I had no idea what to do with the time that I had on my hands at that moment. So that was an unusual place for me.
Yeah.
But it was so memorable because I'd never experienced the kind of peace of, oh wow, I'm not worrying about, what's going to happen next. And I always have, right? I've always been like, oh no, I got to plan ahead for that. I'm the guy that leaves an hour earlier than I might need to, right? Got to be ready for all contingencies.
I know exactly what you mean. I'm that kind of person too.
So to be in a position where I'm not having to think about that was fascinating for me. And at the same time, I was like, okay, great. Now I get to ask those questions. Like, what do I actually want? If I could go do anything, what would it be? And I didn't have an answer to that, but I got connected with somebody who led some exploration of that for me. And in the interim, I did a little bit of work for them, which was mostly just kind of business consulting for businesses. And then I met somebody else, and I thought, I'm going to go back to the world I knew, and I'll just do it for myself and start my own company with that. And that was, and they're like, why are you doing that? Like, why don't you do something different? Why don't you come try this? And this was real estate brokerage and commercial, really mostly about commercial. And so for me, that was kind of a transition that was natural for me, because working with business owners to help them with their needs as how it pertains to leasing real estate or buying real estate.
Yeah.
The real estate stuff I can learn. The business stuff, I felt like I already kind of had a good perspective on how, understanding small business to the point where I know what to ask to determine what matters to them, right? And I understand a lot of the big picture stuff. I understand human resource, and I understand costs, and I understand, how to read a balance sheet, and I understand all of that, right? And so I know how, generally speaking, how a lot of people think about how their business evolves, right?
Absolutely.
And so that was kind of a natural progression and opportunity to go learn how to do something new. And I'd always been interested in it, in a sense, in the real estate, but I hadn't really understood it, and I hadn't met anybody in it that I liked, quite honestly. And so that's kind of what led me into the path of doing what I do now. And I did that like so many other people did, hanging my license at companies and at a different company, and kind of forging a path. But then going into business for myself was a whole different thing.
Yeah. Different ball game.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure your wife now is very happy that you took that time, that hour to stare into that TV, because she sees where you are now. And
well, I mean, yeah, and where she is too, right? I mean, I think it's where we are with her and I,
team.
right?
It's a
Yeah,
team.
100%. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have. I don't know that I would be where I am today, right now, with my companies, if I didn't have someone like her saying, "Yeah, go for it," go for it, because I got this.
Wow.
Because I got you. And so she's like, I got you. Go do what you want to do, right? And that was, I guess that's the aha moment for me. I haven't had somebody say, I got you, but she did. And so, yeah, it's been a journey, we've, like everybody, you got ups and downs, and you start figuring out what's important to you. And the businesses part is just like, get out of your own way and start taking chances and start gambling on yourself, roll the dice on yourself, because you have your whole life, right? Like, that everything that you've set out to do in your life, you've either accomplished it, right?
Sure.
Or you've decided it wasn't for you. But no matter what came at you, you have gotten through all of that. Had you not, you wouldn't be sitting here right now. Okay, so if you can remember that all the time, then you'll probably be more likely to take chances on yourself, because you know yourself better than anybody, right?
Yeah.
So trust yourself and go out and go for it. Like, when I say show up, I mean show up for you. You want something, go get it. Because it's worked for you all along so far, right? And if you've made bad decisions, then you've learned something from that, right? And you're going to change it. You're going to change the way you did something.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I just think everybody needs to have that kind of mindset.
I agree.
I don't think that that's something that you're going to learn by way of anybody other than your family, your friends, your community, but it's not seated in the culture of the way this country is educating people.
It's not. And again, I really mean this. I really have that's a similar mindset to that. And it makes me think, though, it's like, people that don't think like that, does it require a aha moment for them to switch to that thinking? What does it require for people to realize, hey, now you know yourself, now you're going to go after whatever thing you want to do? Like, what does that actually require?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, because I don't know. I think it happens at different points for different people.
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't happen at all, some people never get there at all. And so we're all born with different tools, and we're all born with different opportunities and resources. We're all exposed to a pretty marginal level of of education and like societal integration. And so, I think we have to do it for each other. I think that, people my age ought to be mentoring younger people, right?
I agree.
I think that you don't know, if you don't know that you don't know about it, then how do you know about it?
You don't.
Yeah, you don't. So it happens when people choose to, again, love and support, man. I can teach my kid stuff, but I can't ask him to want what I do, right? But I can love and support him and give him the opportunity to experience things, right?
Yeah.
And that experience hopefully provides him with some thought and some clarity to make some decisions about what he wants to do, and not feel like he has to do X, Y, and Z or define what success looks like for him, right? I don't know what I can ask you what success looks like for you, and your answer now is probably different than it would have been 5 years ago, and it's going to be different than it'll be in 5 years, right?
Probably. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Especially since, I had my whole transformation when COVID hit 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And that was a whole nother thing. But yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Speaking of COVID, actually.
Yeah.
Because I remember when we had met at your business.
Yeah.
We had talked about how that had impacted your business.
Yep.
If you want to share some of those insights again and tell us how that whole isolation period kind of shaped the business.
Well, I think it shaped it like it did a lot of other businesses. It's a kind of a person to person. You have to get face to face to some extent, right? But I think it created a lot of isolation. I think that it changed the culture of my company dramatically, and I know that our company's not special or different than so many others that do what it does, right? So brokerages that are have a lot of in-house brokers that come in and work together in an office. That's what creates your culture, right? You have your who's in your company, how those people treat each other, and how they behave, and how they engage with the society that they're here to serve, if you will. That culture goes away if they don't see each other, and so everybody kind of went home to to do what they do from home on their own. They were kind of forced to, and then they didn't come back. And so now, it changes the culture of your company in that sense, and it changes the way it feels to go into your office and work. And at the same time, it's an opportunity to evolve and create a culture that operates differently than, 20 or 30 people sitting in the same office building together.
And that's what you did. Exactly.
Yeah. And so, I think you have to figure out how to, as a company, you push through all of that. And so many companies have, and, it's changed the business that I do in commercial real estate. That's for sure. Right. You start to see fewer office users, see a lot of downsizing.
Work from home.
Yep. You see companies trying to get people forced back into the office. A lot of movement, a lot of people moving out of area because their companies, have decided that remote works still. And so great, I can live in Bellingham and keep my job out of Portland, or vice versa, right?
Absolutely.
So
yeah. I want to transition to identity, and a little bit about identity and what that means for you. Mike, you were adopted at a very young age, and grew up with parents that were Irish
and German.
Yeah. I guess, how would you say that shaped finding your identity, understanding who you are, kind of how you were talking about taking time to know who you are and trusting yourself, and kind of that broader aspect of identity.
Yeah, that's
it's a loaded question.
Yeah, that's a loaded question. Well, I'll say this. I'll say that I, from birth to 15, 14, something like that, I didn't really know a lot about my identity, but I did start to recognize by 10 or so that I was literally the black sheep of not only the family, but pretty much most of the communities that we'd lived in. And so that difference was super palpable to me. But we're talking about the 80s, 70s, late 70s through the mid 80s. And there was no conversation about, what I need to be considering as I grow up in this country, looking like I do. My mom would tell me stories of pushing me around in a stroller in Oakland, and most of the women who would look like my parents, my biological father anyway, would look at her like, "What are you doing with one of our kids?" And so I heard about that kind of stuff. Like, she acknowledged that I looked different than the rest of the family, right? Which is just her and my dad and my sister, by the way, right? We didn't have a big family, and most of their folks were gone. So I've always had a really small family, but I've always kind of felt like on the outside of it because none of them could relate to what my experience was, and none of them would speak to it. And so there's a feeling, I think, of being alone, like you're alone with yourself with that issue. Pretty much most of my life, that's probably been true. But as an adult, you make choices again on who you surround yourself with. As a kid, you're kind of the circumstances, or you have some limitations there. And so, and where we lived, right? I mean, we lived in an area that just didn't have a lot of people,
right.
that didn't look like me, or that didn't look more like my family, right? And so that was difficult for me to understand how to go take things on when I didn't feel like I had anybody that could relate to me.
Wow.
As a young person. And yes, I had friends, and yes, my family loved me, but at the end of the day, there was a real disconnect there. And I'd say that's always been true. It's probably true now, right? There's just not. I've never been immersed and surrounded by people who are going to look like me or look like you. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
And so, what do you do with that?
What do you do? Yeah.
Yeah. What do you do with that? What I do is it's not on the forefront of my mind. I get reminded, sometimes in a great way and sometimes in a horrible way. But it's not. It's never really what I've led with. Is as I think about identity, I identify as a father and community member and husband and business owner, and I engage with society in that way, and not so much of, ethnic background, so to speak, because that's not something I've had in common with the majority of the people that I interact with, right? If you don't, I can't relate on that level to people who don't understand it. And so I don't.
Wow. I never thought about it that way. Wow. And because someone can listen to that and be like, oh, is he just being ignorant of his ethnic background? No, it's just you grew up in just being kind of the outcast.
Yes. Huh. And what's interesting is, it's not like I don't know people who look like me.
Sure.
Right? I know people. I feel like there's a lack of community, of people understanding that about each other, and collectively working together and working through that and creating a community and a culture, right? And we can all do that. We can make decisions that that's what we're going to do. And I think Brothers to Brothers is a lot of that. And I'm super thankful that group has come together and that I'm part of it. And at the same time, I think that that's not a wedge issue for me as far as how I choose to go live my life. I want more of that. I want more of that around me. And of that, I just mean, I want more people that I can relate to and that can relate to me in the ways in life that I haven't had.
Yeah.
And there's some amazing people in this community, yourself included. Bernard Franklin, I've known since he moved here in the late 90s. And guy is a wealth of knowledge and information. And one of the big things that I really appreciate about him is the way he looks at who you are and where you came from, And when we have been intentionally kept apart and removed from our history
Yeah.
You know, I 100% agree. Like you try to collectively put everybody together as a freaking crayon color and say, oh, black man and black woman and black, or brown. How about where did you come from and where do you originate from? And, you know, like white wasn't white until America decided it needed to pit white against everybody else. Right. Like Italians didn't call themselves white. They called themselves Italians.
Right.
Germans called themselves Germans. Right. Norwegians called themselves Norse. I mean, people
With their nationality.
People identified with their nationality and where they came from, not part of some crayon box color. And this country's been really good about, oh, you're African American. What does that mean? What part of Africa? Do you even know any of the countries? Can you list any of the countries in Africa? You know? And so, like, having people get back to understanding that the history of where my origins are not here, right?
Right.
They're not America. I didn't start when America started.
Yeah.
Last time I checked, we were actually here first.
Right.
But I want people around me who think bigger than the paradigm that they've put us into in this country. And so, and we're talking about identity and going back to that, but I think that my identity, it's difficult for me to try to answer that question and explain how I identify.
Yeah. No, but I think I relate a lot to, because I've also had Bernard on the podcast, and he's I still remember Bernard. Shout out to you, but he brought a stack of books. He gave me a stack of books to read. I read a few of them, seen YouTube videos, CDs, anything that he sends me, I check it out because I also have thought about that actually. But it wasn't until I had that conversation with him that I thought about it. I was like, that's actually interesting because I am Eritrean. You know, I was born in Eritrea. I should be, I'm Eritrean American. You know, I'm a citizen in both, and that's my nationality, and that's who I identify as. But yeah, that's quite an interesting conversation.
Well, dude's a PhD, man.
Seriously,
honorary. He should be.
He should be.
Yeah,
man.
he got knowledge.
Yeah, and he gives great haircuts too. So Busy Bees, shout out to Busy Bees.
That's right. Great haircuts.
Yeah.
And if you want haircuts with a whole lot of knowledge, stop in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you need to do more listening than talking.
And looking around too and seeing all the posters and everything he's got going on. Transition to family, because you mentioned family a lot, and again, me, obviously I don't have kids, I don't have a wife. Yeah, I do want that someday, but what does that feel like? What is that like today? How does that impact your life? Having a family, having a wife and kids. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, my family is my world, and my wife is my best friend, and so, pretty much everything that I want to go after and do, we do check-ins with. I want to make sure that we're all, following the trajectory we want to be on with each other, right, and individually. I think it's having a 16-year-old, right, because it's halfway through high school right now. It's a whole lot of fun.
Yeah.
So, watching him trying to figure stuff out, and he's funny because I learned so much from Adam than versus what I think he learns from me. And some of it is just the way he's so great at engaging with people and people that gravitate to him, and how he identifies. Like he. Let me put it this way. If you and I were standing side by side and he didn't know either one of us, he would come talk to you first.
What is that?
Because he gravitates towards melanated people because that's what he identifies with.
Wow.
And he does it, and he knows that it will make his life socially growing up here more difficult, and he does it anyway.
Wow.
And if you didn't know that I was his father, you would think that he's just another Bellingham kid, growing up in a white household. because I'm relatively light skinned, as you can see that. And his wife or his mom is Norwegian, Eastern European. And so, you look at him and you wouldn't know. But, you look at his prom dates, it looks a little different.
Yeah.
So I'm fascinated by his courage, which is really sad, actually, to have to use that word, because it shouldn't take courage for that, but it does here.
Mm-hmm.
So he goes through shit in this community, but he's also he's so resilient in ways that I feel like I wasn't. So I'm super proud of my son. I think he's going to he's growing into being an amazing human. And my wife is, Vanessa's awesome. She's been a cardiac recovery nurse for 25 years, and she just goes after everything in life with passion. And she's one of those people that is positive about stuff. And I tell you, those two are pretty much what hold it together for me most of the time. Really, like I get so much from both of them all the time.
Yeah,
that just makes life great and much easier to get out of bed and go deal with all the shit I don't want to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're always there. They're always cheerleaders. So
they're your anchors.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful, Mike. Well, Mike, we reached near the end. I like to call this part the deep end of the podcast because I know for any listeners that are still listening, you've made it to the part where I ask the advice question, the ultimate question, the way I always like to wrap it up. But Mike, man, amidst all your experiences and everything that you shared, looking at the younger generation today, me and your son and everyone else, what advice would you give us?
What advice would I give you? Don't stop growing. Don't stop learning. Don't stop trusting yourself. And get up and show up, man. Show up. Show up for yourself. Show up for your community. Show up for the things you care about, because nobody's going to do it for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Mike. Thank you for taking the time so much for joining me on the Black
it's
Experience.
my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
This is an honor. Yeah. Before we actually close, is there any shout outs that you want to do? Either your business, where people can find it, or anything else that you want to throw out there?
I don't mind a little plug of my business is Bellwether Real Estate. Super excited about that company and the people that are in it. I think that's my shout out.
Absolutely, do it. Well, hope you guys enjoyed this awesome episode. It's been an honor. Thank you so much for making it. For those of you who made it to this end, shout out to you guys, and stay tuned for awesome episodes as we roll on in season 5. And until the very next one, guys, peace. What's up, y'all? Thank you so much for tuning into that video. Make sure to click that subscribe button down below, as well as that bell to get notified on every new video and short coming in the future. And check out the description down below to get links to my podcast that is now featured on both Apple Podcasts, Spotify, this YouTube channel, and my Instagram down below. And as always, until next time, guys, peace.